About 20 Community Youth Support Scheme students took part in last night's parade. They modelled outfits from well-known Newcastle designers and fashion houses that include Rundle's, Diva, the House of Jenny Royale and Hotskins. The students treated the audience to a range of well-choreographed routines. According to a project officer from the Charlestown SIS, Eve Hall, the 3-month course has enabled students to develop skills and confidence in front of a camera, on the catwalk, and has generally shown them a more professional approach to modelling. Where will these people be employed, or where are you hoping that they might be employed in the future?
Well, I guess we're centering at small business at the moment, possibly just the occasional fashion parades. And, you know, on a more full-time basis in the dress shops themselves. It'd be wonderful.
These bank photos show the man police believe has been responsible for 4 armed hold-ups in the Newcastle district in the past 3 weeks. They say he's in his early 30s, 183 centimetres tall, of medium build, with dark short hair and prominent front teeth, and he may live in the Newcastle area. Police believe the man committed a hold-up at a Hunter Street branch of the ANZ Bank yesterday, 2 hold-ups last week in Mayfield at the National and Advance Banks, and a hold-up at the Westpac Bank in Newcastle on November the 6th. It's thought the same man conducted an armed hold-up at a Sydney branch of the Advance Bank on November the 13th, and police are sure he will strike again.
I believe that he will continue to try and commit these types of offences until such times as we're able to arrest him.
In tonight's news, another armed hold-up in Newcastle. This time, Jesmond Post Office was the target. A man armed with a .22 calibre rifle menaced staff and demanded money. A police search is currently underway.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Concern has been expressed over the possible relocation of psychiatric patients from Morisset Hospital to Newcastle's Hunter Hospital in Watt Street. We'll bring you a full report on that tonight.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
A man brandishing a .22 calibre sawn-off rifle entered Jesmond Post Office around 12:30. The bandit menaced staff, a woman and 2 men, demanding money. He grabbed an undisclosed sum and fled on foot up Bluegum Road. Police were on the scene in minutes, checking nearby drains and cycleways for the gunman. An army of uniformed officers and plainclothes detectives scoured the streets around Stockland Mall, but failed to find any trace of the man. The post office staff were shaken but unharmed despite being threatened.
Well, they have been interviewed. They have personnel here from the postal investigators and security. They're looking after their welfare. At this stage they are upset. It's a very harrowing experience to be held up.
Police are searching for a man, 35 to 38 years old, 5'9" or 172 centimetres tall, with dark hair, fair complexion, unshaven. He was wearing dark glasses. Meanwhile, a 33-year-old man appeared in Newcastle court today charged with 6 recent bank hold-ups in Newcastle and Sydney. Michael Christopher Archer, unemployed and of no fixed address, was arrested at Barooby Point last night. He was charged with holding up banks at Newcastle, Mayfield, Newcastle Civic and 3 Sydney locations. All of the robberies were committed this month. Bail was not sought today and Magistrate Brown formally refused it. Archer was remanded in police custody to appear in court on the 10th of next month. In a separate incident, police are searching for a gunman who robbed a 37-year-old man in his home at Swan Street, Hamilton about 5:30 this morning. The hooded intruder, who was armed with a .22 calibre rifle, was disturbed by the resident. The man stole money from the bedroom and fled over a back fence.
For most of us, reading the various notices put out by councils, government departments and other authorities is a necessary, if somewhat dull, chore. But for some in our ethnic community, many of whom don't speak English, even simple notices can be confusing and even frightening. Government departments and other authorities have moved to help in a number of ways, such as by providing translators and printing brochures in different languages. But their help doesn't always work, and sometimes in the past the wrong areas have been targeted. Representatives from government departments met at Newcastle City Hall today to discuss whether they are properly meeting the needs of many of the ethnic communities in the Hunter region. According to one of the organisers, Alan McLaughlin from the Hunter District Water Board, one of their biggest concerns is that services are appropriate and not duplicated.
But what we want to make sure of is that we have a coordinated approach and that we avoid duplication of costs in the preparation of translations and things like that. Also, that we get some feedback from the ethnic community as to whether or not what we are doing meets their needs.
An historic farewell at RAAF base Williamtown today as the Air Force says goodbye to its last Mirage Squadron. The pilots and planes of 77 Squadron flew out this morning towards Woomera, where the aircraft will be dismantled and stored. A full report on the RAAF salute tonight.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Hello, I'm Jane Button. Tonight I'll be reporting on a dispute at the Drayton Colliery which has left the mine idle for over 1 week. Miners met outside the site today and decided to stay out indefinitely.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
The graceful two-masted brigantine left Cowes in the Isle of Wight on August the 3rd. She's taken 90 days to reach Australia and made her first stop at Fremantle. Today it was Newcastle's turn and literally hundreds turned out at Wharf for the big event.
At the moment we're going around Australia showing the flag because Young Endeavour is Britain's gift to the Australian people for your bicentenary from the British government and from the British people.
Captain Blake says the long journey's been smooth sailing.
The wind's been with us most of the time. We follow the old sailing ship routes, which makes it nice and comfortable. They tried it before, it worked for them, it worked for us.
Did you have any problems at all?
Yes, occasionally. We ran out of grapefruit about 4 weeks out of Rio.
That's the only problem?
That was my biggest problem.
The Young Endeavour heads to Brisbane next and will take part in the tall ships race from Hobart to Sydney in January. She'll be officially handed over to Australia in Sydney on January the 25th, possibly by Prince Charles, and will be managed by the Navy for people involved in the Young Endeavour Youth Scheme. 23-year-old New South Wales University student Kate Ford has travelled across the world on the Endeavour. 7,000 people applied to go on the journey, and after a series of physical and psychological tests, Kate was chosen as one of only 12 young Australians to go on the voyage. She last saw her Tamworth parents in June, and they travelled to Newcastle today to greet her. Kate says it will take days to tell them about the highlights of her trip.
It's so hard to say that. I mean, the whole trip has been a highlight. I could say our roughest storm was a highlight. I could say that sailing in under the London Bridge was a highlight. I could say that the little barbecues on the beaches we've had have been highlights. They've all been new experiences. The whole trip's been a highlight, really.
Had you done any sailing before?
Almost none. I'd done a bit of catamaranning with my brother, but sailing something like this is an entirely different ball game, especially when you're doing an ocean passage.
Would you do it again?
Certainly. Anytime.
New South Wales started the day at 2 for 43. In McDermott's second over of the morning, he snares Mark Waugh leg before for a duck. New South Wales was 3 for 46. 3 runs later, McDermott strikes again, clean bowling Peter Taylor for 9. At 61, New South Wales loses its 5th wicket when Stephen Waugh was caught brilliantly in the gully by Robbie Kerr. Dirk Tasler and Ian Botham were brought in half an hour before lunch to replace McDermott and Maguire. Second ball and Tasler has O'Neill out LBW for 15. New South Wales were now in all sorts of trouble at 6 for 90. Captain Greg Dyer didn't last long. Botham had him caught behind for a duck. The home state had lost the last 2 wickets for 2 runs. 5 minutes before lunch, Botham does it again. Lawson caught by Torres for a duck. Last wicket to fall was Mike Whitney for 1, caught Trimble, bowled Tasler. Craig McDermott finished with 3 for 56, Dirk Tasler 3 for 37, Ian Botham 3 for 12 and John Maguire 1 for 30. Queensland's opening pair looked set for a long stand until Torres was clean bowled by Whitney. Next delivery and first innings top scorer Greg Ritchie is wrapped on the pads. That was to be an ominous sign. He was bowled by Whitney next ball. Queensland was 2 for 26, but before Alan Border made his way to the wicket, the first streaker of the match took to the field. Australia's only other netball competition for wheelchair athletes is in Melbourne, where 4 teams compete during the normal netball season. The game is open to both males and females, with the competition set to start in April next year. It's being set up by Hunter Regional Netball Coaching Coordinator Nance Dwyer.
I feel they are part of our society. I think they need some sport, some recreation, and I feel that they are just as able to cope with netball as we are. I think they just need something to build up their life.
Obviously they're going to have a group of different rules.
Well, it's almost the same rules, except they do have they have a yellow plastic on their top of their wheelchair, and they can do 1.5 cycles before that's called travelling, and the 3 feet distance is taken from the chest and not from the feet. That's the only difference. The goalposts are the same height, everything's all exactly the same, and they're the only 2 exceptions. So that really there is no exception to the rule other than that.
Anyone interested in playing should contact the Newcastle Netball Association.
The majestic 2-masted brigantine has spent the past 3 days berthed at Lee Wharf, allowing hundreds of enthusiasts to take a closer look at a floating piece of navigational history. Following the original course taken by the First Fleet, the crew of 35 set sail from Cowes in the Isle of Wight on a 90-day journey to the first Australian port of call, Fremantle, before heading on to Newcastle. 24 young people from both England and Australia were chosen from 7,000 applicants to sail on board the $6 million Bicentennial gift, which is flying the flags of both countries high along the way. As the young Endeavour gracefully sailed out of Newcastle Harbour today, hundreds of well-wishers turned out to bid farewell, both on and off the shore. Another Bicentennial project, the locally built replica of Australia's first steamship, escorted the larger vessel through the heads. The William IV also took the opportunity to continue sea trials. It will officially set sail later next month. The young Endeavour is now on her way to Brisbane, before taking part in the tall ships race from Hobart to Sydney. Although she'll be handed over to Australia on the 25th of January, her biggest day will no doubt be when she'll lead the flotilla of tall ships into Sydney Harbour for one of the biggest bicentennial celebrations of them all.
In solo racing, some skillful riding by local Todd Wiltshire saw him beat Englishman Sean Wilmont.
What an opener to our meeting tonight. Wilmot kicks away down the back straight away. Wiltshire comes back at him on the inside. Wiltshire inside, Wilmot outside. Wilmot hooks back inside and Wiltshire!
In the handicap final, 2 riders were lucky to escape this spill with minor injuries.
A heavy ball!
However, it was the Caravan Derby that most had come to see.
In their flying machine, they go up to the up, they go down to the down. They entangle the ladies and steal the scene with their up to the up, and their down to the down. Up, down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the crowd.
It's the first time in 10 years that a professional opera has been staged in Newcastle. Yesterday afternoon, technical crews were ironing out last-minute bumps to ensure that the production, which is due to open on Tuesday night, goes as smoothly as possible. The finishing touches were put on the sets, while the lighting sequence was carefully scrutinised. Puccini's La Bohème is set in a Parisian garret in the 19th century. It's the story of a poor seamstress who has consumption and falls in love with a poet and then dies in the Latin Quarter. The production will be sung in Italian, but will have surtitles to make its story more accessible to the general public. According to director Andrew Sinclair, Richard Owens from Shoeys came up with the idea of staging the production and provided financial backing.
Well, thanks to Richard Owens of Shoeys, who is something of an opera fanatic. And La Bohème, I gather, is his favourite opera. And he very much wanted to stage La Bohème one day, and so this is how it's come about. And I gather with the cooperation of John Pringle, who's one of our cast members, who sang a concert with the Hunter Orchestra. It was discussed with Ulrich Burstein and the Hunter Orchestra and John Pringle, and it was thought that something like this could be mounted. So gradually it's gone ahead, and artists have been gathered from all over Australia and even further. In fact, Glenys Faust has come from America, and I've come from England, although I am Australian, and here we are.
That's an amazing...
Question of them saying, well, we're really
within the Labor Party. The people who supply the money in that new right organisation, that loose coalition of all the reactionary forces in Australia.
As the centrepiece of the City Council's foreshore development takes shape, the reality of finding paying tenants is drawing nearer. The Queen's Wharf project will only be viable if businesses which choose to locate there are financially successful. One major tenant is being sought to operate a seafood restaurant on the first level. Nearly 300 square metres of space with sweeping harbour views will be offered. The adjacent function room will be expected to be serviced by the successful restaurant operator. A number of local restaurateurs are known to have expressed interest in the site, but the cost of fitting out is seen as a possible drawback. One operator has estimated there would be little change out of $1 million if the restaurant was to offer first-class facilities. One unusual tenant, however, will be the Urban Transit Authority. The Queen's Wharf will become the new home for the Newcastle Harbour Ferry service.
Yes, well, Newcastle Council have invited Urban Transit to make the new Queen's Wharf the ferry terminal, and we've almost completed our negotiations to achieve that. We think it will be quite good for everyone to have the ferry terminating at Queen's Wharf, and we expect that that will happen from the opening of the new facility.
Which begs the question, what will be done with the existing ferry terminal, which is just over 6 years old? Already a number of interesting proposals have been floated. One option is for the UTA to maintain its lease of the wharf from the MSB. This would provide a berth for the authority's second ferry and provide valuable storeroom and operational space. However, the William IV project also has its sights on the terminal. Project Director Ken Wickner has confirmed that his group is negotiating with Council for a berth in Newcastle Harbour, which would offer good tourist access and a high profile. He says the existing ferry terminal would be ideal, but that the group would be just as happy with a place in Queen's Wharf.
The miners began assembling at the No. 1 Sportsground at 10 a.m, but it soon became obvious that there wasn't going to be anything like the 5,000 expected. Only about 400 braved the strong winds. They were addressed by a range of speakers, including the General President of the Miners' Federation, John Maitland. He stressed the need for mobilising public support, claiming a campaign of smear and innuendo has left an impression that miners are overpaid and underworked. But Mr Maitland was clearly disappointed with the poor turnout.
We certainly expected a lot more people than what turned up today.
What does it reflect, do you think?
I think it reflects a feeling of complete hopelessness as far as the people in the industry are concerned. I think they just feel that their jobs are going to go and there's very little that they can do about it, and that's tragic, really.
As the more general union rally got underway at 12:30, many of the miners drifted away. They were replaced by other unions, including members of the Waterside Workers' Federation, who had marched to the Sportsground. Once again, numbers were drastically down. There was nothing like the 7,000 that Trades Hall Secretary Peter Barrack had hoped for. Mr Barrack says this meeting is just one of many that will be held around Australia.
Well, there was a national meeting of federal parliamentarians, trade union officials and other activists in Canberra a couple of months ago, and what they sought to analyse was the effect government policies were having on both their popularity and their waning support. Decisions were taken there to commence a campaign amongst the rank and file in an attempt to bring the federal Labor government back to its grassroots.
Overall, union organisers must be very disappointed with today's turnout. Nevertheless, they say their voice against deregulation and privatisation will be heard back in Canberra.
Business people from throughout the Maitland district attended today's awards ceremony. The awards recognise and encourage small business enterprise in the Maitland area. Entrants are judged according to their achievement related to growth in sales and employment, innovation, financial planning, market and product development, and the introduction of new products or services to the area. 7 finalists were announced. They were East Maitland Electronics, the Great Australian Ice Creamery, the Soap Collection from Green Hills, Cairns Proprietary Limited, Maitland Community Credit Union, Campbell's Craft Store at Morpeth, and Hunter Valley Power Lines. Campbell's Craft Store received the Encouragement Award, while Hunter Valley Power Lines was named Maitland's Small Business of the Year for several reasons.
We buy materials locally, which is a large input being a service industry. Also, all our employees, being 24 to 22 at this stage, are all local. It all gets put back into the community.
The company, which constructs power lines and does general electrical contracting as well, has had a good year. In October, it won the New South Wales Small Business Association Hunter and Newcastle Region Non-Manufacturing Award and was highly commended in the state-level general industry category. In the past 48 hours, Hunter Valley Power Lines has signed contracts worth $1.25 million and is currently tendering for other contracts worth $2 million. As a result, it plans to employ more staff from the Maitland, Cessnock or Newcastle areas.